This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on second G20 Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group meeting, deliberations on pressing environmental issues and solutions. The participants are Namita Prasad, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and Omvesh Upadhyay, AIR correspondent.
The second meeting of Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group will take place between March 27 and 29th in Gandhinagar, Gujarat. And today, to talk on what will be the core areas that are scheduled to be discussed in the ECSWG meet, we are joined by Namita Prasad, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change.
Ma'am, the first Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group meeting was held in Bengaluru last month. Could you share the experience and the key takeaways of the meeting?
Thank you so much for inviting me. I would like to state that the first Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group meeting held in Bengaluru had all the G20 countries, 10 invitee countries and 7 international organizations in attendance. The 3-day event began with a side event on biodiversity and land degradation, followed by technical sessions on 3 priority areas and concluded with a communique session on building blocks. The event was divided into a number of sessions focused on 3 priorities of India's presidency, namely arresting land degradation, accelerating ecosystem restoration and enriching biodiversity. That is the first one. The second one is promoting a sustainable and climate resilient blue economy. And finally, encouraging resource efficiency and the circular economy. It is noteworthy to mention that the community involvement and participation in line with India's Lifestyle for Environment or LIFE principles evoked strong response across all the sessions and was established as an emerging concept of significance. In addition, I would like to say that the thought-provoking decisions and inputs received from the G20 nations and invitees emphasize the importance of addressing issues of land degradation, which the delegates felt is often neglected. Recommendations were made in line to prioritize reducing the degraded land by 50% by 2040. The countries expressed a strong commitment to prevent forest and land fires through enhanced policies and regulations, patrolling and other activities like weather monitoring technology, community programs and zero burning. It was very inspiring to see community engagement being highlighted as one of the essential action points towards restoration efforts, which is reiterating the LIFE principles. Also, India's G20 presidency approach garnered the support of countries in attendance, particularly towards promoting sustainable production and consumption. The G20 countries also shared the best practices and it was collectively agreed upon to work towards creating a bold, visionary roadmap to comprehensively combat the interconnected climate change and environmental challenges, a roadmap that sets a clear path for achieving sustainable development. All in all, I am of the opinion that under India's presidency, the Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group meeting has commenced on a very positive note by drawing attention to universally relevant thematic priorities and initiating discussion on possible solutions to counter the challenges posing us as nations today.
Ma'am, as you mentioned, the 3-day meeting encompassed detailed discussions on environment and climate action to pursue sustainable growth. How do you see the Indian presidency steering the deliberations with an outcome-driven approach?
I would like to say that this year, India has taken on the prestigious role of the G20 presidency for the first time, and we have done so with a lot of pride and ambition. India's strategic vision is reflected in its inclusive, decisive and action-oriented approach. The recent 3-day meeting witnessed an enthusiastic and intense exchange of ideas and initiatives on environment and climate action. The tone of the deliberations was directed towards bringing an integrated, comprehensive and consensus-driven approach to address interconnected crises of environment and climate change, in addition to pursuing sustainable development and economic growth, which is much in line with India's presidency vision. The session brought to light the importance of private sector also in arresting land degradation and biodiversity loss. While institutions are actively working towards ecosystem restoration and biodiversity preservation, we must not forget the integral role we play as community and at the individual level. So the sessions place emphasis on community-based actions, community participation and individual behavioral change for environmental conservation. Taking a cue from the work on restoration of degraded landscapes by past presidencies, the Bonn Challenge, the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the delegates agreed to combat climate change with collaborative efforts. Under the biodiversity and land degradation agenda, our efforts will be directed towards strengthening the roadmap for G20 Global Land Initiative and developing the G20 Knowledge and Solutions Platform and collating best practices. our focus for circular economy and resource efficiency would be to accelerate the knowledge exchange on the 3 sub-themes and facilitate the formation of an industry coalition. For Oceans and Blue Economy, we aim to further the principles of sustainable and resilient blue economy, garner support for the G20 Osaka report on addressing actions against marine litter, and facilitate the Oceans 20 dialogue. India's presidency intends to promote landscape approaches for ecosystem restoration. We also hope to build on existing initiatives, such as the G20 Land Initiative via an action-oriented framework for land degradation to address the adverse impact of climate change. In a nutshell, the India presidency intends to encourage active knowledge exchange, collaboration, and open sharing of technology between countries to fast-track the positive outcomes of the summit.
And to mention that the theme of India's G20 presidency is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the guiding tone for the Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group, which was also highlighted in its priorities. Ma'am, can you please explain this in detail as well?
As you have stated, the theme of India's G20 presidency, that is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, is a Sanskrit phrase in the Maha Upanishad, and it is defined as the world is one family. Essentially, the concept affirms the value of every life, human, animal, plant, and microorganism, and their interconnectedness and interdependence on our planet and the wider universe. This concept is reflected in one Earth, one family, one future. On the Mann Ki Baat episode on the G20 theme for the India presidency, our Honorable Prime Minister had highlighted that the G20 partnership comprises 2/3 of the world's population, 3/4 of the world's trade, and 85% of the world's GDP. And therefore, it brings together various demographics, cultures, and values, much like the rich culture and heritage of our country. Being cognizant of the fact that the issues of environment and climate change traverse across industry and social sectors, India offers the world Lifestyle for Environment concept. The Lifestyle for Environment is a behavior-based concept that draws from a nation's ancient, rich, and sustainable traditions to nudge consumers and in turn markets to adopt environmentally conscious practices. To protect the environment and natural biodiversity further, India's G20 presidency will work to promote the 3 priorities for universal oneness, which ties closely with our theme, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or One Earth, One Family, One Future.
And ma'am, you have been a part of various conventions, including the COP meetings held in the past. On similar lines, what, according to you, have been the key highlights of the first ECSWG? How do you see yourself bringing in the experience of other conventions and meetings to add value to our G20 presidency?
I have been fortunate to attend varied convention and meetings and witness proceedings. For the benefit of our listeners, I would like to introduce these conventions and the whole consensus building process. Take for example COP, comprising of representatives from member states and accredited observers. COP, or Conference of Parties, is the main decision-making body of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which assesses the effect of measures introduced to limit climate change against the overall goal of the convention. A key task for the COP is to review the national communications and emissions inventory submitted by the parties. One of the many procedures I have been privy to negotiate and come to consensus on actions to be taken in the future. I endeavour to bring my learnings from the COP meetings to the proceedings of the G20 summit to build consensus. The approach of India's presidency is also to integrate climate change across working groups, since climate change is a cross-cutting theme. The ECSWG will work along with the Disaster Resilient Working Group, the Development Working Group, and the Energy Transition Working Group to synergistically address this issue. I aim to use my knowledge and to aid member countries in arriving at the best practices for ecological preservation and sustainable development across the thematic areas of arresting land degradation, biodiversity, blue economy, and circular economy.
So ma'am, how do you see the first ECSWG meeting in Bangalore taking forward India's vision for its G20 presidency as ambitious, inclusive, decisive, and action-oriented?
India has emerged as a leader, a solution provider, as well as a consensus builder at the Bali summit, which led to India's G20 presidency. This is a clear reflection of the ambition, decisiveness, and action-oriented approach India will adopt to usher G20 members into a solution-oriented and sustainability-driven summit. Traditionally, as you are aware, India practices active public participation as the core of its policy formula. India recognizes that solutions to the world's most pressing concerns can only be solved by working together. Not just governments, but also civil society, business, and youth, amongst others, have a very crucial role to play. Our development models hold inclusivity at the core, and we believe in a human-centric approach to development. The very theme of India's presidency resonates the universal oneness, which explains being inclusive. Further, India also believes that G20 priorities will be shaped in consultation with the G20 countries, along with representatives from the Global South, whose voices often go unheard. In one of his speeches, the Honorable Prime Minister mentioned, it is time to get inspired by our spiritual traditions, which advocate oneness and work together to solve global challenges. And that in itself is what I witnessed during the first ECSWG meeting in Bangalore.
So ma'am, with this discussion, we are getting an understanding that the second working group meeting will have a lot of emphasis on water resources management. Could you please share some of the key points which are likely to be taken up during the sessions?
Today, India is the most populous country in the world with a population strength of 1.4 billion. Unfortunately, India's water resources have not expanded with the population explosion. With 17.5% of the world's population, India has less than 4% of the world's freshwater resources. In 1921, the per capita freshwater availability was estimated to be 5,177 cubic meter, which drastically reduced to 1,508 cubic meter in 2014. If effective action is not taken today, by the year 2050, per capita freshwater availability is expected to drop even further to 1,235 cubic meters, with huge regional variations. An area is characterized as water stressed if the per capita water availability is below 1,100 cubic meters. To put into perspective, 256 out of 766 Indian districts are already water stressed currently. For the successful, prosperous and sustainable development of any region, there needs to be an adequate availability of water. To counter the increasing threat of water shortage and to identify sustainable solutions, the Indian presidency aims to showcase Gujarat as a case study, the story of water scarcity to water security. It has been widely observed that management and use of modern technology have been missing in the water sector in India. By combining management, technologies and people's participation, the water situation in Gujarat has improved significantly. The mission now is to emulate the success in Gujarat to achieve water security to support high economic growth and prosperity across India. Centered around people, technology, climate and sustainability, these initiatives have enabled affordable, scalable and reliable models for the entire world, especially the Global South. Focused efforts by Ministry of Jal Shakti and initiatives like the Namami Gange project, Jal Jeevan Mission and Swachh Bharat Abhiyan will be other areas of discussion.
G20 gives India an opportunity to amplify the voices and concerns of the Global South and reflect the broad concerns of the developing countries in the discussion on economic and financial issues. How does the India presidency plan to leverage its position to mobilize the voices of developing nations and shape global decisions?
G20 gives India an opportunity to amplify the voices, and this has been taken up by our Honorable Prime Minister also when he said that India's G20 priorities would be shaped in consultation with not just G20 countries but also with guest countries from the Global South who often feel that their concerns and problems do not get the attention they deserve. India has committed to being the voice of Global South and assured that the G20 summit would be an opportunity for those countries that are not part of G20 process also to share their ideas, concerns, aspirations and expectations. The Global South today is facing critical issues like unabated rise in the prices of oil, food, fertilizer, coupled with mounting debt and rapidly deteriorating economic growth. India's endeavour is to provide a common platform to deliberate on the concerns, interests and priorities that affect the developing countries. The G20 India presidency provides a platform to exchange ideas and solutions and most importantly, to have a consensus-driven approach and a common purpose to address issues which affect these countries. To take the initiative forward, a virtual summit called the Voice of the Global South for Human-Centric Development was organized in January this year. The summit brought together 125 countries of the Global South and gave them the opportunity to share their perspectives and priorities on a common platform across a whole range of issues. This initiative was inspired by our Honorable Prime Minister's vision of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, Sabka Prayas. That means the support of everyone, development for everyone, trust of everyone with everyone's effort. Several developing countries like Bangladesh, Egypt, Mauritius, Nigeria, Oman and the UAE have also been invited as guest countries by India to the G20 summit to be held in September 2023.
Indeed, it was an insightful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today on All India Radio.
You were listening to a discussion on second G20 Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group meeting, deliberations on pressing environmental issues and solutions. The participants were Namita Prasad, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and Omvesh Upadhyay, AIR Correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official.